I liked Oliver from the age of 18 to 22. During those years, the biggest entertainment in the social circles of Beijing was watching me chase after him and do all kinds of foolish things for him. Later, a friend asked him, "If you didn't like her, why didn't you just reject her outright?" Oliver shrugged casually and said with a smile, "I kept her around for entertainment." It felt like from that day onward, the tidal wave of love I had for him suddenly receded. I stopped clinging to him, took off the necklace he had given me, and gradually became much quieter. When there were rumors about him and someone else, I just smiled and let it go. When he brought a new girlfriend to parties, I no longer got jealous or caused a scene. Then one day, he said he was really getting married and handed me the invitation in person. Everyone was waiting for me to lose control, to fall apart in regret. Even his closest friend, Bruno, glared at me and demanded, "Are you really not going to go after him?" I furrowed my brows, my voice trembling and breaking as I replied, "Bruno, can you ask me that question after you get off me?" Chapter 1. The first time Oliver brought a date to a gathering of friends. It had been 3 months since our last meeting. That was practically a miracle in our circle. A friend leaned in, whispering words of comfort. "Selena, if you can't take it later, just find an excuse to leave, and don't make a scene, okay? It's someone's birthday today." I smiled but said nothing. Oliver's new girlfriend was beautiful and well-matched with him. When the two of them walked in hand, everyone instinctively glanced at me. I just sat there quietly, a faint smile fixed on my face the whole time. "Let me introduce my girlfriend, Lily," Oliver said, emphasizing the words my girlfriend as his gaze briefly swept over my face. My expression didn't falter. My smile didn't waver. I didn't even flinch. Oliver didn't look at me again. The atmosphere in the room grew livelier. When it was time to cut the cake, chaos erupted. I used to love the chaos the most, smearing cake on others and then hiding behind Oliver for protection. Though he'd complain about how childish and annoying it was, he would occasionally shield me. This time, I stayed out of the commotion, but my close friends didn't spare me. When they chased after me with cake in hand, I laughed and dodged, always careful to steer clear of Oliver, with frosting smeared on my face and dress. I pleaded for mercy. Only then did they turn their attention to someone else. I wove through the crowd, heading out to the restroom to clean up. Just as I stepped out the door, Oliver called after me, "Selena." I instinctively turned back. Chapter 2. The hallway light cast shadows across Oliver's face, obscuring much of his expression. We were close, yet I couldn't discern the emotions in his eyes. "Do you need something?" I asked. Oliver didn't reply immediately. His gaze lingered on my neck. "You changed your necklace?" I froze for a moment before quickly regaining my composure. "Yeah, I did." The previous necklace had been a gift from him for my 18th birthday, one I had worn for 4 years. He curled his lips into a smile, one I couldn't quite decipher. "Why didn't you come to the last gathering?" "The last gathering?" I hesitated, feeling a sudden warmth rise to my ears. I had planned to go, but Bruno had asked me out at the last minute. The two of us ended up ditching the gathering altogether. "Were you avoiding me?" Oliver asked nonchalantly. "I had something come up, so I couldn't make it," I replied. Oliver didn't seem entirely convinced but didn't press further. "What do you think of Lily?" "She's beautiful, graceful, and clearly comes from a well-mannered family," I answered sincerely. Oliver stared at me without blinking. "I think so too, which is why I'm suddenly thinking about getting married." "That's great. Don't forget to send me an invitation," I said with a faint smile. Oliver chuckled. "Sure, you'll be the first to get one." With that, he turned and walked away, seemingly losing interest in the conversation. I didn't linger either, hurrying to the restroom to clean the frosting off my face. But as I approached the restroom, I spotted Bruno standing there, smoking. "Aren't you supposed to be on a business trip?" I asked, surprised, while pulling out a tissue to wipe my face. Bruno stubbed out his cigarette and looked at me through the mirror. His expression, both amused and mocking, came back early. He said, "Didn't want to miss the show earlier." I turned, crumpling the tissue and tossing it at his face. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't dodge, letting it hit him, and even looked pleased with himself. What? I leave for just 2 days. And you two are already reigniting the old flame? Chapter 3. Reignite what? It never even ignited. I snapped, glaring at him. Bruno nodded. Fair enough. Then, suddenly, he took a step closer. Don't move. What's wrong? Bruno leaned in, his hand brushing off a smudge of frosting on my earlobe. Your dress is dirty too. I know. I got you a new one while I was away. Want to try it on? Following Bruno upstairs to one of the rooms, I felt a bit dazed. To be honest, Bruno and I had never gotten along. Since we were kids, he loved picking on me, teasing me while calling me spoiled and overly emotional. Later, when I started chasing after Oliver, everyone in our circle treated me as a source of entertainment. There wasn't any malice in it, really, but Bruno always seemed to despise the way I clung to Oliver. Over the years, we barely interacted. Then that night happened. By some twist of fate, we ended up in bed together, and everything became complicated. I deleted his number and resolved never to cross paths with him again, but it seemed Bruno had other ideas. The last time we met, I'd intended to set things straight between us. Yet somehow, we ended up in bed again, and to be honest, the second time was far better than the first. I couldn't deny it, I'd started craving it. I couldn't help glancing at Bruno in the elevator's mirror, a rebellious third-generation heir, born with annoyingly good looks. Unlike the other rich boys in our circle, he grew up in a military compound and spent years in the army. His physique was truly unmatched. I thought about his abs, his Adonis belt, and those solid muscles. I remembered clawing his back until it bled, cursing him through my tears for being a beast. And instead of getting mad, he clumsily tried to comfort me. The thought left me feeling inexplicably restless. Selena. Bruno suddenly pulled me close. What are you thinking about? Your ears are bright red. Thinking about your body? No. I mean, how you stay in shape. I stammered, covering my face in embarrassment. I couldn't bear to look at him again, but I made up my mind. Tonight would be the last time. Once it was over, I would make things clear, draw a line, cut all ties, and bury the secret between the two of us forever. Chapter 4. As soon as we stepped into the room from the elevator, Bruno pinned me against the back of the door. He had definitely gained some experience by now, this time. He remembered to cushion my back with his hand so I wouldn't get scraped against the door. Shower first. I managed to gasp, pushing him lightly between deep kisses. Bruno, however, seemed insatiable, his palm pressed against the small of my back, pulling me firmly into his arms with a slight force. He tilted his head down and kissed me again, the kiss deepening gradually. My legs began to feel weak, and I could barely balance on my high heels. Giving up, I kicked off my shoes and stepped on his feet. Bruno's breath hitched sharply, scooping me into his arms. He carried me toward the bathroom, his grip almost crushing me along the way. Warm water cascaded over us, soaking both our bodies entirely. Bruno cupped my face and kissed me again and again. His usual sharp, defiant features seemed softened, almost tender, under the stream of warm water. For a fleeting moment, as his intense gaze met mine, I felt something stir in my chest. Selena. He leaned his forehead against mine, his voice rough as he murmured my name. I felt dazed, my fragmented responses shaped by the sound of his voice. Fingers locked around mine. He asked in a hoarse voice, "Doesn't it feel better than last time?" I bit down on my lip, refusing to answer. Instead, my sharp nails dug deep into the firm muscles of his arm, leaving long, raw scratches across his skin. Chapter 5. The last time was over. Bruno carried me to the bathroom to wash up. I leaned against the edge of the bathtub, watching him shower. Hot water cascaded down his broad, muscular back, scattering into countless droplets. Maybe the experience was just too good, because the years of dislike I had for him seemed to have faded away. But I knew all too well, we weren't each other's type. Ending it sooner would be better for both of us. Bruno lifted me out of the bathtub, wrapped in a large bathrobe. I sat comfortably on the bathroom counter, letting him blow dry my hair. When he finished, he thoughtfully carried me back to the bedroom, resting my head on his shoulder. Half asleep, I murmured his name. Bruno. Yeah, let's not see each other again after tomorrow. Don't come looking for me anymore. I'll block you later on WeChat. Calls. QQ. Weibo. Block everything. Whatever happened between us. Keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone. Bruno suddenly stopped in his tracks. Selena, he said, his voice heavy, sleepily. I lifted my eyelids to glance at him before drifting off completely. Bruno placed me gently on the bed. He stood by the bedside for a long moment before letting out a self-deprecating laugh. Selena, you really have no heart. But I didn't hear it. Chapter 6. The next morning, in front of Bruno, I deleted all his contact information. He sat on the couch without much expression, a cigarette between his fingers, though he didn't take a single drag, wearing the new dress he had bought for me. I smiled at him, pretending to be carefree. I'm leaving now. For the next month or so, Bruno and I didn't see each other again, but, strangely enough, Oliver seemed to appear around me more and more frequently. I began declining some unimportant gatherings with friends, trying to minimize any chance of running into him, until a friend's engagement party, where avoiding him was impossible. That day, Oliver drank a bit too much and, somehow, ended up acting out in front of everyone. Selena, do you have a problem with me? I was baffled. You're drunk. Oliver, go rest for a while. We've been friends for so many years, and now you're avoiding me like I did something wrong to you. I've just been busy lately. All right. Selena, I know what you're thinking. Oliver let out a cold laugh. But even if you're upset, it won't change anything. You can't compare to Lily. I couldn't help but laugh. Upset? Over what? You're really drunk, I said, standing up to leave. But Oliver grabbed my arm. Didn't you used to get so jealous? Why aren't you jealous this time? Is it because you've finally realized it's pointless to make a scene? I frowned and yanked my arm free. That's when I noticed Bruno standing not far away, watching the scene unfold with an amused smirk. That infuriating, entertained expression of his was maddening. Fuming, I pulled out my phone and opened WeChat. Bruno had sent me several friend requests before, which I had ignored, but now, I accepted his request. Then, I sent him a message. Want to meet? Bruno hesitated for half a minute. Yes. Same room as last time. After sending that, I immediately blocked him again. Bruno. Chapter 7. As the engagement party wound down, I told a friend I was leaving early, grabbed my bag, and slipped out. Oliver asked where I was going, but I ignored him. Someone as prideful as him wouldn't lower himself to beg for an answer. On my way out of the banquet hall, I heard a few friends calling out to Bruno. Bruno, you're leaving too? Didn't you say we'd keep drinking later? I've got something personal to take care of. I'll host next time, he replied. Oliver stood up, feigning an attempt to stop him. What personal business could be more important than a friend's engagement party? What's with you disappearing all the time lately? Hidden behind the lush greenery, I watched the group. Bruno, dressed in a formal black suit for the engagement, stood next to Oliver. He was taller by a bit. Unlike Oliver's slender, almost frail frame, Bruno's physique was built through years of military training. There was a palpable tension in his presence, a raw physicality. That phrase slim in clothes, muscular without seemed made just for him. I couldn't help but think back to the nights we spent together. How easily Bruno could lift me with one arm. How he carried me from the bedroom to the bathroom without stopping once. And then, the memory of how I couldn't hold back, leaving a trail of dampness down his waist and abs, made my cheeks burn all over again. I raised my hand and pressed the back of it against my flushed face, trying to cool down. When I looked at Bruno again, he seemed to sense my gaze and glanced in my direction. Instinctively, I stepped back, my heart racing and my face growing inexplicably warmer. It's something important, Bruno said, his tone firm. Very important. Oliver grew increasingly curious. What's so important? You're being so serious about it. Are you in love or something? Yeah, a couple of times I've seen you glued to your phone. Seriously? You're dating? Who is it? Someone we know? Bruno smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. For some reason, I thought that smile of his seemed a bit lonely. I'll tell you all about it some other time. She's a pretty reserved person and doesn't want to go public yet. I'd rather not say too much, or she might get upset if she finds out. Oliver gave him a thoughtful look. Really? I haven't seen you with any girls around lately. It's recent, Bruno said, fixing Oliver with a steady gaze. When she's ready to go public, I'll bring her to meet you all. All right then. We won't interrupt your big plans. Oliver smirked mischievously. The iron tree has finally bloomed. Huh? Then he leaned in and lowered his voice. Have you, crossed that line yet? Bruno's expression turned a few shades more serious. I don't like talking about those things. It's disrespectful to her. Oliver looked slightly embarrassed. Bruno didn't let the awkward moment linger. I'm heading out in a couple of days. It's on me. Let's meet up again then. Sure, but bring your girlfriend next time. Yeah, we're all curious about her. Bruno nodded with a polite smile before turning to leave. He walked out through the revolving door, his figure vanishing from sight. As he left, someone casually commented, "Doesn't it seem like the ones missing from these gatherings lately are always Selena and Bruno? They're not involved, are they?" Oliver's face darkened with a flicker of annoyance. What nonsense are you spouting? Bruno's hated Selena since we were kids. You all know how he is. He can't stand girls who cling too much. That's true. Those two never seem to see eye to eye. The conversation quickly shifted to another topic. But Oliver couldn't shake the heavy, cloud-like weight in his chest. He glanced out the glass doors. Bruno was long gone. Selena had left early too. The thought gnawed at him, and he couldn't help but piece things together. It was true, every recent gathering had been missing both of them. But maybe it was just a coincidence. Oliver reassured himself. After all, he'd known Bruno for years. They were like brothers. He was sure of one thing, Bruno and Selena absolutely couldn't stand each other. What Oliver didn't know was that the two people he thought despised each other were now heading to the same hotel, just a few steps apart. Chapter 8. When I came out of the shower, Bruno was already sitting on the couch in the living room. There's another bathroom. Why don't you go shower there? I asked casually while drying my hair. Bruno leaned back against the sofa, his gaze fixed on me. Didn't you say we wouldn't be in touch anymore? I glanced at him. You can leave now if you want. The corner of his lips tugged into a self-deprecating smile. But he stood up anyway. He walked over, took the towel from my hands, and started drying my hair. My hair is long, and I always get impatient trying to dry it myself after washing. If he was willing to help, I was happy to let him. Once my hair was mostly dry, Bruno turned off the blow dryer. I'm going to shower. I replied lazily, curling up on the couch and turning on the TV. But before heading to the bathroom, Bruno leaned down and kissed the corner of my lips. Wait for me. About 15 minutes later, the sound of running water stopped. Soon after, Bruno pushed open the bathroom door and stepped out. A towel was loosely tied around his lean waist, accentuating his broad shoulders and narrow hips, a perfect inverted triangle. His chest and abs were impeccably sculpted. Long legs, firm glutes, and a healthy, sun-kissed tan gave his skin a captivating allure. Even though I'd seen his body multiple times, I still felt a little shy whenever I saw him like this. I couldn't help but steal a few greedy glances before averting my gaze. Bruno seemed to notice, the corner of his lips curving into a faint smirk. He casually rubbed his hair with a towel before tossing it aside and walking straight toward me. Before I could react, he lifted me off the couch. Bruno, startled. I clung tightly to his neck, glaring at him, but his eyes sparkled with genuine amusement. Selena, what? What position do you want tonight? His question was teasing, accompanied by a kiss brushing against my ear. His breath tangled intimately with mine, creating a lingering sense of tenderness. When I spoke again, my voice had softened. As if you know that many. Bruno laughed, clearly enjoying himself. I've been practicing since last time. Shameless. Of all things to practice. Want to test it out? I tried to keep my composure, but my heart was already racing wildly. Sure, but if I'm not satisfied, I'll find someone else. Before I could finish, Bruno silenced me with a sudden, forceful kiss. The unfinished sentence dissolved into a muffled murmur, swallowed by his deep kiss. By the time we reached the bed, he pinned me down onto the soft mattress. The belt of my robe came undone with a quick pull. His hands, roughened and calloused from years of training in the military, were stronger than before. I couldn't stop a soft cry from escaping. His breathing grew erratic, heavier. Selena. His eyes were filled with desire, his voice hoarse. Why does it feel so different this time? Dazed. I looked at him, unsure of what he meant, but it seemed he couldn't handle the way I was looking at him. His scorching kisses trailed downward, stopping at the peak of my chest. A breeze stirred the white curtains, lifting their tassels in the air. As the tassels swayed, my slender waist arched like a drawn bow, instinctively responding to him. Selena, do you like it? I shook my head, biting my lip to keep from answering. Yet tears, purely reflexive, welled up at the corners of my eyes. Bruno didn't push too hard. He simply repeated the question, and when I didn't answer, he pressed deeper, forcing a reaction. Chapter 9. Selena, are you still going to block me? My choked sobs were shattered by the rhythm of his thrusts. No, I won't block you. My fingers clung tightly to his forearm, my nails nearly digging into his firm, warm skin. Pleasure, once tasted, becomes addictive, and Bruno was truly a good student. Every time we were together, the experience was better, much, much better than the last. But now, he refused to let me have it all at once. He teased me relentlessly, dull blades carving through my sanity, leaving me aching and desperate. Now tell me, do you like it? I didn't answer, so he thrust deeper, harder. I like it. I like it. I gasped. Selena, will you be with me? My eyes shot open in shock. Bruno? He didn't respond, only looked down at me from above. Those rebellious, untamed eyes I used to despise so much now seemed as deep as an abyss. They were filled with a restrained intensity, carrying emotions I couldn't decipher. You've always hated me, haven't you? If I hated you, would I come back to you again and again? He lowered his gaze and smiled faintly, even with the spring flood threatening to burst. He held himself back with excruciating control. Selena, I'll ask you just once, will you be with me? I felt like I was losing my mind, my body, my spirit, my rationality. Everything was teetering on the edge of collapse. In the end, it was desire that consumed it all. Yes, Bruno. Selena. His kiss fell gently. I'll give you everything. Selena, whatever you want. It's yours. Chapter 10. By the time everything ended in an exhilarating release, the sky was completely dark. My phone was filled with missed calls and WeChat messages. Half of them were from Oliver. I didn't reply. After a moment's thought, I blocked him on all platforms. Shortly after, Bruno's phone started ringing. He picked up, and Oliver's voice came through clearly. Bruno, where are you? Bruno reached out and pulled me into his arms. I was utterly spent, lying limp and motionless against his chest. I'm with my girlfriend. What's up? It's nothing. Really, Selena's phone has been off, and no one can reach her. I'm not that worried, but everyone else is pretty concerned about her. You live near her place. Did you see her come home? Bruno glanced down at me, and I held a finger to my lips in a should gesture. Yeah, I saw her. She's home. All right. Then, I won't interrupt your date. Oliver teased him for a bit before finally hanging up. Bruno set his phone aside and then picked up mine. Unlock it. For what? Take me off your block list. Reluctantly, I unlocked my phone and watched as he removed every block I'd set. A mix of complicated, inexplicable emotions churned in my chest. To be honest, I didn't really want to block him in the first place. Keeping things as they were between us, this arrangement wasn't bad at all. After all, it felt amazing every single time. Selena, what now? Stop only looking for me when you're in the mood, and don't forget what you promised earlier. I hesitated, fumbling for a response before finally blurting out. You actually believe what people say in bed? Are you dumb? Bruno let out a laugh, seemingly both amused and annoyed by me. All right, if you don't want to keep your word. He leaned down, pinching my chin. I'll head to your house tomorrow and have a little chat with your parents about what we've been up to. Bruno, I panicked immediately. If my parents found out about me and Bruno, They'd drag out the household registry and force us to get married on the spot. All right. I get it. I'll keep my word, but can you just give me some time? Sure, when you've thought it through and are ready to make things official. We'll continue. I'm not that desperate. Bruno bit my lips lightly. No, you're not that desperate. Except you make me change the bedsheets every time. Bruno! Mortified and furious, I bit his jaw in retaliation. It wasn't my fault he was so wicked, always teasing me just enough to drive me crazy. If it weren't for that, how could I ever react so intensely? Chapter 11. Not long after, another friend returned from studying abroad and organized a gathering. For once, Bruno, Oliver, and I were all there. Of course, Oliver brought Lily along, as usual. As for Bruno and me, our seats were thoughtfully placed far apart by our friends. After all, back when I was chasing after Oliver, Bruno's disdain for me was so obvious even a dog could see it. As the drinks flowed and the atmosphere grew livelier, someone turned to Oliver. Oliver, when are we going to drink at your wedding? Oliver glanced at me briefly, almost imperceptibly, before pulling Lily close in a show of affection. Soon. We're already planning it. Everyone instinctively looked my way. I didn't even lift an eyebrow, focusing instead on savoring my soup. The dishes tonight were excellent, with several of my favorites on the menu. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Bruno. Want to go for a walk later to digest? Where to? The lake. There's an artificial one nearby. It's nice. Sure. I was feeling a bit too full, and Oliver and Lily's over-the-top display of affection was making me nauseous. A walk sounded like a good idea. Let's go separately. You go first, and I'll find you later. Bruno didn't reply, but a moment later, he got up, cigarette pack in hand, going out for a smoke. Need some air, he said casually, about 10 minutes after he left. I stood up too. I'm heading to the restroom. Everyone was caught up in conversation and laughter, so no one noticed the details. But what I didn't realize was that as I left, Oliver watched me for several moments, and as soon as the door closed behind me, he stood up as well. Chapter 12. Bruno texted me, saying he was waiting downstairs. I didn't go to the restroom but headed straight for the elevator. Downstairs, I walked through the lobby and out the door, spotting him standing under a tree, smoking. When he saw me, he stubbed out his cigarette. The night breeze was slightly chilly, and I instinctively hugged my arms. Bruno came over and pulled me into his arms without a word. He leaned down and kissed me naturally, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. I didn't resist, tilting my face up to meet his kiss. We kissed deeply, completely lost in each other, oblivious to the figure standing on the steps not far behind us. Oliver stood there, his face dark and expression unreadable, watching the scene unfold. Not long after that night, news broke that Oliver and Lily were getting married. Shortly after the announcement, invitations were sent out to everyone in our circle. I received one too, hand-delivered by Oliver himself. Taking the invitation from him, I congratulated him sincerely. Congratulations on your happy ending. I'll be there on your wedding day. But Oliver didn't look particularly happy. Selena, to be honest, I never thought I'd end up marrying Lily, he said, his voice low. In fact, I used to think I'd eventually give in to you, that you'd wear me down. There's no need to talk about that now. I cut him off, smiling lightly. I was young and naive back then, and I did a lot of stupid things. Don't take it to heart, it's all in the past. The last trace of a smile disappeared from Oliver's face. Selena, I'm not joking, I'm really getting married. I know, congratulations, I replied, still smiling. Oliver's gaze turned cold, and he let out a bitter laugh. You know, out of all of us, I always thought Bruno would be the first to get married. I instinctively asked, why? Oliver stared at me intently. Because I've known for a long time that Bruno had someone he liked very much. He told me he planned to marry her as soon as he reached the legal age. But something happened, and they didn't end up together. Now, it seems I've beaten him to it. I froze, a whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. But in the end, they all condensed into a bitter ache. No wonder Bruno had never been caught up in scandals over the years. It turned out he'd always had someone in his heart. If it hadn't been for that drunken mistake the two of us made, our lives would never have intersected like this. I don't even like him. I've always liked gentle, refined men, calm and elegant. Bruno and I have been at odds since we were kids. I've always disliked him. But why? Upon hearing that he once had someone he deeply cared for, does it hurt so much? Selena, Oliver said, gesturing toward the invitation in my hand. Make sure you check the time. Don't be late. Chapter 13. That day, I went out drinking with my best friend. She thought I was devastated by the news of Oliver and Lily's engagement. But that wasn't it at all. The thought of their marriage didn't stir even the slightest ripple in my heart. All I could think about was Bruno, about the girl he liked. What kind of person was she? What was Bruno like when he liked someone? If that girl came back, would he immediately surrender and get back together with her? I even found myself imagining absurd scenarios of them being together. I wasn't sure if I was just unwilling to let go of his body, or if I had started to develop feelings for him. After my best friend left, I called Bruno. When he drove over to pick me up, I was too drunk to stand, obediently sitting on a bench by the roadside, waiting for him. I watched as his car sped toward me. I watched as his tall, straight figure stepped out of the car and walked toward me. I watched his face, strong yet strikingly handsome, and suddenly, I felt an overwhelming urge to cry. By the time Bruno stood in front of me, my face was already streaked with tears, but he didn't wipe them away for me. He didn't coax me gently, the way he did when we were in bed. He just stood there, his expression unreadable, silently watching me. The grievance in my heart surged like a fountain. Bruno. I choked out his name, reaching a trembling hand toward him. His expression softened, just barely. After a few seconds, he finally raised his hand and brushed away the tears clinging to my lashes. Selena, why are you crying? I didn't know how to explain. I didn't know how to put into words the chaos of emotions swirling inside me, so I just leaned against his chest, crying silently for a long time. Eventually, Bruno seemed to grow a little helpless. All right, that's enough. Stop crying. I'll take you home. Take me to your place. I had never stayed the night at his place before, but this time, I wanted to. I wanted to lie in his bed with him. I wanted to spend the entire night together. But all these thoughts, I couldn't muster the courage to say them out loud. Chapter 14. Bruno's house was large, with a spacious and minimalist layout. The bathroom is yours to use freely, he said. Don't go into my study. You can do as you please with the other rooms. He handed me a pair of new slippers. Looking at the oversized men's slippers that resembled tiny boats, I couldn't help but ask, don't you have women's slippers? No. Have you never brought a girlfriend home? You don't already know if I've dated or not. He wasn't wrong. We'd grown up together, after all, but everyone has secrets. And Bruno was no exception. As I changed into the slippers, I casually asked, so, have you ever liked someone? Bruno folded his arms, leaned against the wall, and smiled slightly. Yes. I bent down to slip on the slippers, but his answer made me lose my balance and nearly fall. Bruno reached out to steady me. How much did you drink? Not much. I straightened up but stumbled again. Without hesitation, Bruno scooped me up. Go shower first. When the first round was over, I lay sprawled on his bed, scrolling through my phone. Bruno had gone to get me some water. When he came back, I was looking at my WeChat moments. There was a flood of red invitations, friends showing off their wedding invites. Messages popped up every now and then, mostly asking if I was going to reconcile with Oliver. Bruno's face darkened, and he snatched my phone away. Come drink water. I stayed where I was, refusing to move. Feed me. Bruno didn't object. He picked me up and helped me drink. Then, without warning, he pressed me back onto the bed. This time, he was rougher. I quickly reached my limit. Bruno, are you going to go after him? Who? You know who, Oliver. He's getting married, isn't he? Why would I go after him? Didn't you used to love him? Weren't you ready to die for him every day? Bruno. Selena, answer me now. Are you going to go after him? His tone was harsh. Bruno, can you ask me that without pinning me down? I frowned, my voice breaking as his movements overwhelmed me. No. Answer me first. Will you go after him? He asked me again, and with every question, his intensity grew. I couldn't hold on anymore, my voice trembling as I gasped. No. I won't go after him. Remember what you said. Bruno, be gentler. I can't. Bruno lowered his head and kissed me deeply, intensely. His stamina was astounding. I felt like a tiny boat floating in a raging tide, tossed and slammed by wave after wave, nearly coming apart. Chapter 15. Maybe it was because Bruno had been too rough that night. And the condom tore. The date of Oliver and Lily's wedding hadn't even arrived yet. But I found out I was pregnant. Staring at the report in my hands, I felt completely stunned. Oliver had said Bruno liked someone. Bruno himself admitted he had someone he liked. There was no future for us. There couldn't be. What we had was nothing more than a way to pass the time, to chase away loneliness, to satisfy physical needs. With Bruno's personality, he would only marry the woman he loved. So, he wouldn't want this child. But just the thought of that made tears fall uncontrollably. I turned off my phone and stayed in my apartment for 2 whole days. Finally, I made up my mind. While it was still just a tiny embryo, the best choice was to let it go. But as soon as I was hooked up to the 4 at the hospital, Bruno stormed into the room. He held my surgical consent form in his hand. I had never seen his face so grim. Those sharp, rebellious eyes were filled with frost, colder than I'd ever seen. Selena. When he said my name, his voice was hoarse and trembling. That frost gradually melted, but it turned into raw pain and disappointment. Why don't you want it, Bruno? I sat up in shock. Selena. Why don't you want it? Bruno gripped my shoulders, his fingers trembling uncontrollably. My tears suddenly fell. Bruno, I just didn't want to cause you unnecessary trouble. Is it because you didn't want to trouble me? Or is there another reason? Before I could respond, Bruno laughed bitterly. You already know Oliver and Lily aren't getting married, don't you? That's why you decided not to keep the baby, isn't it? What are you talking about? I stared at him, confused. But I won't let you have your way. Bruno's eyes were filled with a fiery intensity. I already called home. My parents know you're pregnant, and they know I'm going to marry you. Marry? That's right. Marry. Bruno cupped my face, wiping away the tears streaming from my eyes. One by one, you gave me your word. You promised to be with me. You promised to make our relationship public. Selena, you can't go back on your word. But what if the woman you love comes back someday? My tears wouldn't stop. I looked up at him, my face wet and trembling. Bruno, I just don't want you to hate me. I don't want her to come back one day, only for me to be in the place that was meant for her. I don't want you to resent me. That's why I thought, before I fall in love with you, before the baby becomes more than just a tiny, unfeeling embryo, ending things now would hurt less. The woman I love? Yes, I asked you. And you said you had someone you loved. Then why didn't you ask me who it is? Who is it? Bruno cupped my face and suddenly smiled. Selena, go to my study. You'll find the answer there. Chapter 16. I found myself back at Bruno's house once again. This time, he handed me a pair of new slippers, women's slippers. They were pink, cute, and just my size. I thought you didn't let me into your study. I didn't before. Now you can. Why the change? You'll understand once you go in. Bruno seemed a little uneasy. I'll head downstairs for a bit to grab something, he said, adding, be careful. Don't trip or hurt yourself. Got it. Got it, I replied, waving him off. Bruno's study was quite spacious, filled with books arranged neatly on shelves. But what stood out was his desk and the wall behind it. The wall was covered with photos, large and small. It didn't take much attention to notice the common thread among them. I was in every single one, from kindergarten, through elementary school, all the way to when we grew older, and the photos became less frequent. On his desk sat a pink, rhinestone-studded photo frame that screamed teenage sentimentality. Inside the frame was a picture of 2 kids. The girl was me, with 2 oversized bows in my hair, smiling in a completely unflattering way. The boy was Bruno, taller than me by a good half a head. striking a pose in front of the camera. The frame was a Children's Day gift I had given him. The back of the frame had a crooked line of writing, wishing Selena and Bruno friendship forever. I couldn't help but laugh. But as I laughed, tears started falling. For some reason, I thought of the time in middle school when I read The Smiling Proud Wanderer by Jean Young. I'd been so upset then, wondering why the little apprentice sister had suddenly fallen for someone else. Why she would abandon her amazing senior brother and even lose her life for another man. But now it felt like I had become that little apprentice sister, drifting further away from Bruno, chasing after Oliver like a fool. And yet, unlike her, I was infinitely luckier. I hadn't walked blindly into ruin, and I hadn't missed the person who had quietly loved me all along. Chapter 17. When Bruno returned carrying several boxes of supplements. I was sitting in his chair, reading his diary. This idiot, when we were kids, he used to bully me on purpose just to make me cry. Turns out, it was Oliver who gave him the idea. He told Bruno that the way boys show they like a girl is by teasing her and making her cry. As he grew older, he regretted it. But by then, it was too late. I had already fallen for the gentle and refined Oliver. It turned out he had never hated me. What he despised was the Selena who revolved around Oliver, whose emotions were controlled by him, who had completely lost her sense of self. I didn't dare imagine how much it must have hurt Bruno to watch all of this. He had thought about giving up, about leaving for good. He had considered trying to like someone else, to settle for what was easy. But in the end, he couldn't. The night I got drunk and he took me away was the only time in his life that he acted recklessly, throwing everything on the line. On that page of his diary, there were only 2 words, written boldly and clearly: no regrets. I closed the diary. Bruno pushed open the door to his study. When he saw me, the tips of his ears flushed faintly red. He cleared his throat before asking, "What do you want for lunch?" Leaning back in the chair, I reached out my hand to him. Bruno walked toward me, step by step. He took my hand in his, then knelt down, gently pressing his face against my stomach. "Selena, is there really a baby in here?" "My baby?" I couldn't help but laugh. As I leaned down to kiss him, tears fell from my eyes and landed on his face. "In a few months, you'll feel him move." We held each other like that, neither of us willing to break the peaceful happiness of that moment. Chapter 18. The day before Bruno and I were to register our marriage, Oliver suddenly came to find me. By then, I already knew about his breakup with Lily. To be precise, Lily was the one who initiated it. After all, no woman could tolerate being with someone who treated something as serious as marriage like a joke. The truth was, he never actually intended to marry Lily. Even the invitations were just a spur-of-the-moment plan to provoke me. And the reason for all this? That night, he had seen Bruno and me kissing. How ridiculous. It was from that moment that Oliver began to realize, little by little, that he cared about me far more than he had ever thought. I listened to him tirelessly recount the entire journey of his feelings over the years, speaking with such clarity and conviction, as though trying to persuade me. But I truly didn't care, not even a little. In the early stages of pregnancy, I was constantly sleepy. Halfway through his story, I started to feel drowsy. "Selena, are you tired?" Oliver looked at me in disbelief. He knew how much I used to love listening to him speak, admiring his eloquence and refined knowledge. But that was the past. I had long since realized that men like him couldn't compare to someone like Bruno, a man of action. I honestly didn't know what I'd been thinking back then. Stretching lazily, I yawned. "Yeah, first trimester stuff, it makes you sleepy all the time." Oliver was completely dumbfounded. "First trimester? What is the first trimester?" "Wait, you're pregnant? How can you be pregnant? Why couldn't I be pregnant?" I found his reaction unbearably noisy. "If you don't have anything else to say, you should leave." "I want to sleep." "Selena, explain this to me. How did you end up pregnant? How could this happen so soon? You and Bruno, have you two been involved this whole time?" Oliver must have been thinking about all those times when Bruno and I were conveniently absent at the same gatherings. He completely lost his composure. "Yeah, we've been together for a while," I said casually. "But what does that have to do with you?" After all, we never dated. I stretched again, feeling the fatigue settle in. I'm heading to bed now. Don't let me keep you. Selena, you've liked me for so many years. I can't believe you'd fall for someone else so quickly. Oliver's face was full of resentment. If this is just because you're pregnant. Of course it's not just because of the pregnancy. I just really like Bruno. I liked him even when we were kids. I just lost my mind for a few years. But now I've found my way back. I stood up and sincerely advised him. Honestly, Lily is a great girl. Oliver, you should seriously consider getting her back. Otherwise, you'll regret it someday. Selena, don't come looking for me anymore. Bruno's very possessive and gets jealous easily. Chapter 19. As expected. When Bruno found out Oliver had come to see me, he was sulking with jealousy all night. I spent ages kissing and hugging him, trying to coax him out of it. But suddenly, Bruno got up and went to the bathroom. When he came out, he wouldn't let me touch him. After all, it was still the first trimester of my pregnancy. Not even 3 months yet. The doctor had strictly instructed us to avoid intimacy during this time. Originally, my mom wanted me to stay at her house for a while. But Bruno absolutely refused and reassured both our families multiple times before they agreed to let me stay with him. At first, we started off sleeping under separate blankets, behaving ourselves. But soon enough, I couldn't resist climbing into his blanket, craving his kisses and cuddles. Selena, we really can't do this right now. I'm not asking for that. I just want you to hold me. I wriggled in his arms for a while until I found the most comfortable position and closed my eyes contentedly. But Bruno was clearly struggling. Selena, like this. I can't sleep at all. Relax. Bruno, how am I supposed to relax? He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his warm breath tickling my ear. With the person I love lying in my arms like this, even a saint wouldn't be able to. So what do you want to do? Bruno held me tightly, burying his face against my neck. After a long moment, he mumbled softly, "Let me just hold you for a little while." Selena. I reached out and stroked him, feeling my heart tremble. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. Does it feel unbearable? I'll take another cold shower in a bit. Bruno. Yeah, aren't you forgetting to say something to me? What? I love you. Bruno let out a low laugh, full of joy. Selena. I love you. I hummed softly. All right. I love you too. And after saying that, I couldn't help but laugh. Under the warmth of the night, we held each other close under the blanket, laughing together. It felt like we'd gone back to our carefree childhood, when Selena and Bruno were just two innocent kids. But now, as adults, our love would last a lifetime.